Ralph here from Microjig, and in this video we're going to be making this utility sled start to finish. So stick around and let's see how it's done. Now on Microjig.com there's a complete set of plans available for free that you can download as a PDF, and we're going to follow these plans step by step during this build. So they're a great combination. You can watch the video and follow the plans. The jig, you're going to have to supply some 3/4 inch high quality plywood. I'm using Baltic birch here. It doesn't have to be Baltic birch. A good cabinet ply would work, but make sure there's at least 11 layers of plies. That's a good indication that it's a quality piece. Otherwise, all of the parts and pieces that you see here are available through Microjig.com or your local Microjig retailer. So we're going to use the 360 sled kit with the jig handle back here, and optionally we'll use the pop stops as well. I'll show you how to do that. We're going to modify the fence a little bit. But you could also order the single ZP750 bar, pair it with the variety pack of hardware and the jig handle. Either way you go, you'll get to the same point. I like the 360 sled kit because it comes with the ZEROPLAY guide bar and the hardware you need, but either way you want to go. So step one in the plans, we're going to want to cut our plywood 11 3/4 long, 7 inches wide. So I'm going to turn on the dust collector and we'll get started. That's our 7-inch width. There's our 11 3/4. It doesn't have to be super precise here. So this is our blank, 11 3/4 by 7 inches. Now I'm going to set to 2.5. And we're going to cut the second part. So this blank is both the body and the fence. We'll cut the fence off now. All right, so there's those two pieces. That's what we need to get started. So step 3 of the instructions is to mark a center line down the middle of your part, which we've done. And then 1/2 inch from the leading edge is where the first mounting hole is going to go. So I'm going to use my awl here to mark that. And then the ZEROPLAY guide bar comes with a drill guide in the kit as part of the packaging, but you can also print it out offline, which I'm going to do. I like doing in this case so that I can line everything up nice and neat. Now there's a center line on here so that you can line it up with your line on your part. Also, just to make sure that you printed it in the proper scale, there is a scale down at the bottom that we can compare and make sure that looks pretty good. It looks like everything's, all the numbers and the lines line up. So this is a 1-to-1 scale so that everything will work out. I'm going to fold the front edge so that I can see that first hole. I'm going to line that up to my mark here. And then on the back, I can fold that one as well up near the hole. And you can cut it as easily as folding it, but folding is good. And this way I can mark my holes. So you can see there's the first hole. And I'm going to mark the second. This is going to be a 3/4 hole for the adjustment. And then we have the marking holes, or the mounting holes. All right, so all the holes are here, and I'm just going to make a little line at each one just so I can see them a little easier. And then another trick I like to do is to mark them for which size they are, because that makes a difference. So here I'll put a small circle, and here a small circle, and here a small circle, and that marks out my 3 mounting holes. And then I'll put a larger circle here, here, and here. That tells me that those are the mounting holes, because it is 2 different drilling. So the mounting holes are going to get a 1/4 inch through hole with a 1/2 inch counter bore, and you can do that using the 1/4 inch bit and the counter bore and the Forstner bit. I would drill the counter bore first and then drill the through hole afterwards. Much easier to do it that way. But the other alternative is to use our 2-step router bit that you see here. Now I've got one mounted into the drill press. It comes in both 1/4 inch shank and 1/2 inch. If you have a full-size drill press, you can use the 1/2 inch shank, but a lot of drill presses only have a 3/8 quill, so make sure you check that before you buy. But anyway, this will drill the through hole for me and do the counter bore at the same time. And if I bring my head down until it touches, I can set my depth stop to 1 1/8 of an inch from here, and that'll give me the perfect setup. This bit also will round over the transition between the 1/4 and the 1/2 and at the top of the 1/2. So it takes care of several operations, or a couple of different operations in one. Run it at 1200 RPM in the drill press, and I'll show you how it works. That's one. Two. Now you notice that I've already got the fence set for the 3 1/2 inch cut, and that way I don't have to reset the fence for any of these holes. They're all on the same line. And there we go. There's our 3 mounting holes. 1/4 inch through hole, 1/2 inch counter bore, everything set up around it. So now we've switched to a 3/4 inch Forstner bit, and this one I don't need to limit the cut, it's just going to go all the way through. Now here's our base with the 3 mounting holes and the 3 adjustment holes all ready to go. Now we can move on to the next step. Next up, in step 6, we're going to want to cut the relief grooves for the 2 dovetails that go into the base. Now, you don't actually need these. If you want to use the handle, you could just screw it in place, but I like to move the handle around based on what I'm doing and where I'm working, and we'll talk about that later. So having the 2 grooves makes that a lot easier. So we're going to measure and mark. The first one is going to be at 3 inches on center, and the second one is 6 1/2. And I chose those because they're going to put them more or less between these holes so they won't interfere with anything. We've got the relief bit set up in the router table, so we can set our fence, make the 2 cuts, then we'll switch over to the dovetail bit and do the same. Now here in step 7, we need to cut the 2 back corners. They can be cut to anything, really. It's just a matter of, knocking off the corners. But I'm going to go ahead and cut them to the 2-inch by 2-inch bevels that are on here. You can do what you like. We're just going to use the miter gauge on the table saw with a stop, and we'll just go ahead and cut those like this. And they don't even have to be perfectly 45. They just need to be close enough. We're just knocking off corners here. I'll go ahead and use the gripper to hold it while I make the cut. Now here in step 8, we're going to take the upright and we're going to cut a little rabbet right along here, the same thickness as our base, in order to just let it set together a little bit better. It's not totally necessary, but it just makes life a little bit easier. And I'm going to make this just a little bit shorter than the width of the stock, so I get a tiny little gap underneath my fence here. And that way I don't have to worry about it hitting anything or rubbing. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to take our base, bring the saw blade down to just below the surface there. And then I'm just going to set the rip fence just maybe half a blade, 1/16 of an inch. I don't need to go deeper than that. It's just for alignment purposes. So now this will sit on top of there just like that, and we'll glue those two together. But not yet. So as instructed in step 9, I've marked and drilled a couple of holes in the fence or the upright of our sled. And now we're going to use the bandsaw to cut the slots. And at the same time, I'll just knock off the corners so that it's a little bit smoother. Ironically, this would be a great time to use our sled to make these cuts. But they're easy enough to do by hand, and you could literally use a handsaw. And then again, I'm just knocking these corners off so that when I go to put the hardware in or out, it's a little bit easier. These slots are roughly 1/4 of an inch wide, and the hardware is only 3/16, so there's plenty of room. Now in step 11, we're going to go ahead and knock the top corners off this upright so that, again, it's nice and neat. Step 12 is a pretty straightforward glue up. I'm going to use the parts from the Match Fit Work Holding Kit to just hold the parts together while you don't need a lot of pressure here. Everything's all set up. So we're just going to use a little glue. I put some painter's tape down where I needed it. And then I'm just going to put these together. Remember, it's supposed to sit on top here. There we go. Into that nice little groove. And then with the edge guide stopping the part, I'll bring the ring clamp in, and I'm just going to apply enough pressure just to hold those two pieces. All right, so step 13, we're going to start making our fence. I've got some scrap MDF here. MDF is perfect for this. The fence is sacrificial. It's going to get chewed up. You can use whatever you like, but MDF is cheap and easy to come by. Just like before, we're going to cut the relief grooves and the dovetails at the router table. All right, so now before we go ahead and assemble everything, I'm just going to take a few minutes and knock off some of the edges, break these edges here, just kind of give it a general smoothing with a little bit of sandpaper. It's not a bad idea to do, and it doesn't take but a few minutes. All right, so now we're going to go for the assembly. First, we'll put the ZEROPLAY onto the jig, the router, sled. So I'm going to make it as small as possible. Then we're using the 3/4 material, so we'll use the 3/4 screws. That's one of the advantages of the two-step router bit and the 5/16 deep counter bore here. You can use the same size screw as the thickness of your material. You never have to figure out the depth of the counter bore versus the length of the screw. It's always going to be the same. So with 1/2-inch material, use the 1/2-inch screw. With 3/4 material, we're going to use the 3/4 screw, and it's always going to line up. Each mounting hole is getting a washer and the 1032 by 3/4 inch screw. I'm sorry, 832 in this case. And I'm not worried about centering them just yet. I'll square this up after the fact. Remember that these holes are 1/4 inch diameter, but the screws themselves are only 3/16. So that gives you a little bit of room to play. That way, if your holes are not perfectly aligned when you drill them, that's okay. So I'm just going to basically snug these mounting screws up. And now, there's plenty of room here to play because we have the ZEROPLAY at its minimum height or width. So if I loosen this, you can see very clearly that by moving this back and forth, it gets wider and narrower. So again, we're going to set it to narrow, put it all the way to the right of the miter slot, and then using the wrench that we include to pull back on the securing screws, the button head screws, I can just bring it back until it touches the left side. So I'm coming back, and now there's no side-to-side play, but this is very easy to move, and the whole system works really well. We don't need these anymore. So now we can square that up by just bringing the rip fence over, and now I can loosen these 3 mounting screws and square the sled to the fence. The fence should already be square to the saw blade, so now everything is square to the saw blade. It's a quick and easy setup. All right, now we can mount the fence. Now the fence, I made it reversible. It's the same either way. So you're going to put the dovetail groove with on the high side up against the piece here, the jig. So I'm going to put, using 2 of the 4 screws that came with the 360 sled kit, I'm going to put the knobs on. And then I'm just going to slide this over. And now, as you can see, I can slide this side to side wherever I need it, and then lock up the knobs, and it's locked into place. So the jig handle comes with a couple of dovetail nuts, the 1032 screws you need, and a washer. You just drop the screw down through the handle, put the dovetail nut on the bottom, and now I can mount this where I want to. Remember, we put 2 slots in here. I like it in the back at the router table where I've got a little more room side to side, but a lot of times I'm working on a little job site saw, and so I'll put it in the front so that as I come back here, I'm not tipping off the end. But I can also mount it in both. So I can do an angle this way, or I can do an angle the other way. So just these two slots give me a tremendous amount of flexibility in the way we're going to use this. But for now, I'll go ahead and mount it toward the front here in my what I call the table saw position. And once I secure it with the screwdriver, it's not going anywhere until I loosen it up again. And I like this jig handle because it's the same handle that comes on the gripper. It gives me the ability to both push and pull on it, and it's really rugged. It fits the hand well. That's a good addition. Now, I've got the wrench, and one of the things I like to do is actually mount the wrench right here in the top of the upright, and that way I have it, I know where it is. So I'm going to drill a small hole for the short leg of the key. I'm going to put a little countersink in it so that the neck goes around, and then we'll put a magnet in this side to keep it in place. Now that just drops on there. And that's pretty much it for the build. I can take this off the table saw and go to my other tools. So let's try it out. Let's take it over to the bandsaw and see how well it works there. So as I come over to the bandsaw, okay, this is too tight. It's not going to work because it's set up for the saw. I'm going to loosen these three button head screws that adjust it. Bring that all the way out so it's loose. Hold it to the right. Slide this back until it just touches. Tighten the three knobs. ZEROPLAY. Again, this is pretty close, but it's just not good enough. So once again, we're going to loosen it up. Here at our router table. I'm going to set it to 0. And then we'll slide it back. All right, we're ready to rock. So earlier I had mentioned the pop stops and moving this dovetail groove here to accommodate. The pop stop slides into the dovetail track, comes with its own little screwdriver so that you can set it and lock it in place. And it's designed so that when you're not using it, it moves out of your way. But then when you need it, it pops into place. It works like a flip stop, but unlike a flip stop, I don't have to do anything with it. It's automatic. So I can raise up my blade here. I've got my pop stop set, so I can trim this end off, flip it around, lock it in, and cut it off. It gives me a lot of opportunities to do various things, and it acts as a stop. It also works on the horizontal. So if you've got a 360 sled or some other sled where you've got dovetail grooves in the base, this will work in that just as easily. It's not gravity-based. So the pop stop is a nice accessory to add to your system if you're building jigs and fixtures the match fit way. So there's our build. It's easy to make, only takes a little bit of time, can do it in a single day or over a weekend, and it's useful at the table saw, the bandsaw, the router table, anywhere you've got a 3/4 inch miter slot that'll fit the ZEROPLAY guide bar. And because it's quick and easy to adjust, you can move it from machine to machine in just a few seconds. A full set of plans is available on the Microjig website, and there are links in these plans to all the parts and pieces that you're going to need to do this.